welcome to episode 39 of Role Play Grow, the podcast for tabletop entrepreneurs, creators, and fans. I am Courtney Stover of Lightheart Adventures, and in this podcast, we talk to the creators behind the brands in the tabletop roleplay gaming space about who they are and how they are turning their passion for gaming into a career. Today's guest is Aster, an incredibly talented animator and comic artist from Mexico City. I found Aster a while back by looking for an artist to draw my dog, Bowser, as a ranger in a few pieces. As y'all may or may not know, I'm actually working towards opening an Etsy shop soon for D&D themed pet merch like bandanas, bow ties, and collars. I decided that I wanted Bowser to be my mascot, and I needed someone who could draw him as a D&D character. Ruby from Possum Creek Games recommended Aster to me, and I fell in love with his art style. 3 amazingly adorable pieces later, I am a fan of him for life. Aster tells the wild journey he's gone through, everything from an abusive boss at 17 to working on Cartoon Network game animation to comics and commission work. Aster is one of the artists working with Possum Creek Games, and you can see his work in the upcoming Yazeba's Bed and Breakfast, which we heard about in last week's episode. We discuss balancing full-time work with freelance commissions, finding clients, finding what art mediums make you happy, and so much more. I am in such awe of Aster, and I cannot wait for you to hear about his journey. If this is your first time tuning into Role Play Grow, welcome! This podcast is a part of Lightheart Adventures, which is a small company I co-founded with my husband. We offer a weekly blog on our website where you'll find tips for running games, free monthly one-shot adventures, product reviews, and so much more. You'll find that blog at lightheartadventures.com. Britton also creates beautiful dungeon maps both on DM's Guild and on a commission basis. He's currently working on the 3rd in a series of map packs for Wild Beyond the Witchlight. There will be 5 packs total, 1 for every chapter, and they offer a look at some additional locations in the adventure. You can find all of those and our other map packs by going to DM's Guild and searching for Lightheart Adventures as the author, or by going to lightheartadventures.com/shop to find all our DM's Guild and Drive-Thru RPG publications in one spot. Some other ways you can support us and this show are by subscribing to the show and leaving a review. Reviews help me reach more people, and if you leave it on Apple Podcasts, your review might even get featured on an upcoming episode. Lastly, you can help support the show by checking out our affiliates, like the creator behind some of our favorite dice, Dice Envy. They offer gorgeous dice in a variety of materials, including wood, metal, stone, and resin. Go to diceenvy.com and enter code LightheartADV to get 10% off your order, get some snazzy dice, and help me keep this show running. That is all for now, so please enjoy this conversation with Aster. I am so excited to now introduce y'all to comic and concept artist Aster. Hello, Aster. How are you today?
Hi, Courtney. I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really glad to get to chat with you. I guess it's not in person, but over more than just emails.
Yeah, it's been very fun working with you. I don't know if you know, but we've been working on a few illustrations for Courtney, and that's been really fun. But it's really nice to talk to you in like person, kind of, finally.
Yep. Definitely going to be gushing about all of the artwork that you are doing for me because it's adorable and you're making Bowser look like the best little ranger boy he could possibly be.
Oh, I'm so glad. It's actually funny because Bowser looks a lot like my own dog. So like ever since the first moment that I saw him, I was like in love because I was like, oh, that looks so much like me now, my own dog. And like, yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. What kind of dog do you have?
She's just a mutt, you know. I just like literally when I was in high school, I was like, I used to go like to high school in the city, in Mexico City. I am from Mexico City. And there was like, it was just like a building most schools are in, but like it wasn't really like, you know, fenced and students could go out whenever they wanted. And in front of it, there was like a very iconic building in Mexico City that's called Monumento de la Revolución, which is like the memorial for Mexican Revolution. And it's like a really big like sculpture with some like fountains and stuff. And she was literally just like a stray dog, like a puppy in the middle of the street. And I picked her up and I took her home. And like back then I didn't live in the city. I lived outside of the city. So I had to take like 3 trains to go back to my house. They weren't like dogs weren't allowed in the train. So I just like hid her in my bag and just made the trip back home with an illicit dog in my bag.
Oh.
Yeah, and that was like she's like 11 years old now. So yeah, but yeah, basically she's just like a stray right out of the street.
Oh, well, that is so cool that you were able to rescue her and that she's been with you for so long.
Yeah, she's my baby. Like right now she lives with my parents, but I still visit her a lot. And now like in her old age, I have like started buying her lots of apparel, like I like to dress her in funny shirts and stuff.
Does she like getting clothes on her? Because Bowser
Yeah.
actually loves it and it's hilarious.
Yeah, actually, like it's kind of like I cannot do hats. I think that's the one thing that most dogs will just completely not be cool with. But I can definitely like dress her in like shirts and bandanas and stuff. So I'm really excited. Like that's kind of the reason I like, I've done a lot of like work illustrating people's pets as like D&D characters. And that's, I think, maybe kind of one of the reasons why, because I always really like dressing my dogs up. So
I love that.
yeah, it's like kind of like the origin story for all of my D&D pet illustrations, my own dogs letting me just do whatever I want with them.
Okay, well, let's get into this a little bit. Can we start things with, can you tell us a bit about who you are and then how you got into D&D and playing games?
Sure. Well, I'm Aster. As you already said, I'm an illustrator from Mexico City. And well, I've always really loved just like fantasy. And I started with books like with obviously The Lord of the Rings or like Sabriel. There was a really good trilogy of books by, I think the author's name is Tamara Pierce. Harry Potter, of course. Just I've always just really been a lot into fantasy. I think I was in high school when I learned about D&D just by being on the internet. I was like a Tumblr child. And I remember I followed, there's a Tumblr that's called So Super Awesome. And it's just mainly people who do crafts on Etsy, like a collection of artists that work on Etsy and like showcase their work. And I just started like, it's funny because I just really started loving seeing dice, like all the different kind of beautiful dice that are available on the internet. And I was like, "Ooh, what's that?" And then I like figured out or like realized that you can play and pretend to be characters from like basically your favorite stories. And that just blew my mind as someone who's like always been into fantasy, as someone who's like, I've been drawing since I could basically hold a pencil. I've been drawing all of my life, and I've been drawing like my first drawings were, I think, like fan art from books, from fantasy books. And it's just like, I think just the union of all those interests that have made me as a person. So that's, it's cool.
Yeah, that is really cool. Do you get to play any games these days?
Yes, right now I am playing a D&D campaign with my wife. Right now we are playing with a couple friends. My wife is being DM. It's cool because before this, I've been playing a little bit of some other games like Monster of the Week and so on. So with some friends, I have another friend who always used to run sessions and campaigns for us, but he didn't like D&D at all. He just liked different kinds of games, or he even like made up his own like sets of rules. But it's kind of nice to go back D&D and like do it everything by the book, and I mean that literally, because we even went and bought the books to have here in Mexico City. And it's a really cool like tool right now for my wife, because she doesn't really speak Spanish, and we live in Mexico City, both of us right now. And she like uses it kind of like a tool to communicate with my friends who kind of speak English but not super much. So it's just really fascinating to see how like they find a common ground in like fantasy and stories, and they learn how to communicate.
Yeah. Is your wife why you go back and forth between New York City and Mexico City?
Yeah, well, right now we don't live in New York City anymore. Like we packed up the apartment last month, but up until last month, and for like we were doing that for like a year or so. This is actually the first time in our 6 years of relationship that we've been able to live together. We started living together in February, I think. So yeah, that's been really cool. What wasn't super cool was the fact that we had to pay rents both in Mexico City and New York City, but thankfully that's over.
Yeah, that's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, cool. So I would love to know how your art journey began.
Well, as I said, I was pretty much drawing ever since I could hold a pencil. I remember when I was like 4 years old or something, my brother and I used to visit my grandparents a lot, and they didn't really have games or anything for us. What they had was books, and what they had was like paper and pencils, like colored pencils for us. And my brother, like, he's more of a scientific mind. He like never really grabbed books or anything. He mostly just took like remotes and other like appliances apart. But I did take an interest in books and in art, and I basically started drawing fan art of the stories that I read. And ever since I've been drawing, I got my first tablet, like my first drawing tablet when I was 13, because I got really into DeviantArt. It was like 2007, so it was like the height of DeviantArt. My dad gave me a drawing tablet for Christmas, and yeah, I started practicing. And by the time I was 17, I got my first job as an illustrator for a publishing company. Mostly just doing colors for another artist's illustrations for children's books. And yeah, like I've always had that passion in me. I went to art high school where I like, they were kind of like majors, if you can call them that. You could major in visual arts or dance or drama or music. And obviously I chose visual arts. And yeah, then I went to college for animation and digital art. And it's always been my passion, mostly storytelling, and I think really goes hand in hand with D&D and role playing games.
That is such a cool experience. And it's amazing that you were able to focus on that so early and that you got an illustration job at 17.
Yeah, I was really lucky. My dad knew like one of his friends had owned a publishing company, and that's how I got the opportunity to do that. But it wasn't all, I don't know how you say this expression, this idiom in English, but like it wasn't all perfect and like rose, because at some point that guy like really took advantage of me like being not super like experienced and being very young and naive and very like, I don't know, not really valuing my own work or my own talent because of my age. So, like, just demanding a lot of me, wanting me to like work on weekends, not paying me, that sort of thing.
How did you get away from that?
Well, just by talking to my parents, and like, I am very, very fortunate in the sense that my parents have always 100% supported my passion as an artist. So I've always been able to talk to them about all kinds of things regarding that. And yeah, so like my dad was friends with this guy, so he talked to him, and like they even like broke up their friendship over it. They're like decades old friendship over it because he wasn't treating me right. So my parents really stood up for me, so that was awesome.
So after that, which sounds definitely like a challenge and a learning experience, what were you able to move on to after that?
Well, it was really hard after that because I was 17. I was about to finish high school, and I was kind of in a really low point after that because that really like messed up with my confidence and like my self-worth, because I was like I wasn't good enough to, now that I look at it with like maturity and like perspective, I'm like that's nonsense, and that guy was like a workplace abuser. Back then I was like that must mean I don't have to make it in the industry, and I am very unprofessional and I'm not good enough to stay at a place working like that. So I was like in a really low point. Also, like in Mexico there's really not like, I've always really, my dream was always to be in animation. Yeah, because it's like again like the marriage, I guess, of my passions, like storytelling and drawing. And in Mexico City, or in Mexico, like in general, even more back then when I was in high school, we didn't really have schools or like careers or places where you could go and study it that weren't like super expensive. My family didn't really have a lot of money to put me like in an art school or like do a like, let's not even talk about like me going to the US or Canada or whatever to study animation. So I was kind of really depressed for a while, and I actually took a couple years after high school to figure out what I wanted to do. And I was finally able to, at the end of that period, my mom found an animation school for me to go to. And it wasn't anything fancy, it was like a really small school in the city. But I ended up going, and I don't know, I have a lot of mixed feelings about art education, about going to art school. But I think at that point in my life, I really needed the structure, and I'm glad I went. And yeah, that's kind of how I got back into track to becoming, I guess, an artist. Even though my first job I didn't like, my first actual job, because I don't really like counting that other bad experience as my quote unquote break into the industry or whatever. But my first job that I got wasn't really, and thanks to my school or anything. It was like a completely wild, completely out of the blue, completely had nothing to do with school.
I mean, random job opportunities are always, I don't know, I find them like the most interesting. So what happened?
Yeah, so like at the middle of my senior year in college, I was like I've always been, again, I started going to, I was in the internet from a very young age, probably younger than I should have been. And I was in DeviantArt and stuff. And then I moved to LiveJournal and Tumblr, etc., etc. And by that time, I had made a bunch of friends on Twitter, and some of them were actually like already working, as professional artists in Mexico and stuff. So one of them one day posted a job posting to a video game illustration, like game artist and artist in general. So yeah, I applied, and I really didn't think I was gonna get it. At that time, I kind of wanted to start like making my own money again. I had also, like, when I took this break that I talked about after high school, I took a couple of retail jobs, but I was extremely miserable because, retail jobs tend to be really miserable, unfortunately. So I didn't want to go back to that. So I wanted to try my hand, because I was like, okay, so I already had a job in illustration once. So who's to say I can't do it again? So I applied, even though I really didn't think I was gonna get it. But lo and behold, I did. I started being social media artist. I was just making like GIFs and little illustrations for their social media. But after some time, I actually ended up getting promoted to game artist, and that ruled.
That's really cool. Like, is there anything interesting that you learned about working as a game artist that you hadn't necessarily encountered before?
Oh yeah, like it's funny because I always said I didn't want to work in video games. Like there was a lot of opportunities in my college, in my school, where professors were like, "But there's a lot of money in video games right now, and you could go into video games, and it's easier actually in Mexico to get a job as a game artist." And I was like, "But no, I don't want to be in video games. I want to be in animation, and I don't want to be in video games." And I was very adamant about it, almost like defensively, so almost like angry that people offended, but people would assume that I would end up in games. But yeah, and I somehow ended up in games, and I loved it. I loved everything I learned. I even ended up at some point making animations for a game for Cartoon Network. So I ended up animating like characters from Steven Universe and Adventure Time and the Powerpuff Girls and stuff. So that was really awesome and one of the like most amazing things I've gotten to do in my career, and I'm really grateful for that. I learned a lot. I think I learned more in that job than I ever did in school, honestly. And actually, it's funny that this interview comes at this time because yesterday was my last day at that studio.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What's next?
Well, I actually started getting more and more into comics because as well as animation I always really wanted to get into comics, and the opportunity presented itself for me to start doing inks and pencils for this comic project that I'm currently working on. It's Mexican American publishing company, and we are doing comics about Mexican and Latina superheroes, and that's like really awesome. I think I'm having a lot of fun with that, and like I really feel like it's been great. It's been an amazing learning opportunity, and it's like it has changed a lot of like my perspective of what I wanted to do and how who I wanted to be as an artist, like working in that video game studio, and I'm super grateful for that. And also like the friends I made there, and like it was just a really great job. I don't think most people can say that about their jobs. Maybe I'm really, really grateful for that time that I had in Hyperbeard. It's like that's what it's called, Hyperbeard Games. But I'm really happy and grateful that I get to do comics now. And I also want to focus a little bit more on my own personal projects. I've had a graphic novel with my wife that we've been planning ever since we met, but basically, which was almost 6 years ago. And we're gonna start like working really hard to make that turn into our reality next year. So there's a lot of exciting projects right now.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Congratulations on the new job with the comic.
Thank you.
And that does sound like a really cool experience over the last few years, but I'm glad that you're able to move back to what you wanted to be doing.
Yeah, I'm really glad. I do think, I did a talk a couple of years back about careers and like for people who are just like getting out of school, like graduating and stuff. I think it's really important. Like if you want to be in this kind of career, like a creative career in such a competitive industry, I think it's really important for you to be flexible and for you to know that like sometimes you don't really take like a straight path and you don't know what you're gonna find along the way, but it's really important for you to be very like, I don't know, to open your eyes and to open yourself to the possibilities of what you might find along the way. And I'm really very grateful. I'm pretty sure that it's going to inform my art and who I am as a person further and as an artist for the rest of my life in really interesting ways. And I don't even mean it like as an emotional like, oh, I'm so grateful for this. You guys were so nice to me. I even mean it like I got to animate Cartoon Network characters, which like it was like a childhood dream. I learned so much about even like stuff about technical art. Like we worked a lot with Unity, which is a software that a lot of major video game developers work with. It's a tool that I never thought I would be able to use. When I first started working with them, I was just like doing little GIFs in Photoshop and stuff. And now I know about coding and about, how to use a very technical software. And I don't know, it gave me a lot of confidence in myself, in things I never expected I would be able to do.
That does sound like a really amazing journey. Like, I'm sure there were a lot of struggles along the way. But something that I would like to ask about, which I realize that this will probably change since you're starting a new job, but how do you balance your time between the full-time job and all of your like personal projects or like your freelance client work?
Okay, so I've been thinking a lot about that in the past few days. Well, I've been thinking a lot about that ever since I've been doing that, because it's all basically it takes my entire time. Or like not really, because I do try to get myself some time to like just be a person and not be drawing, because it can get really exhausting. I started doing like the freelance side gig alongside with my full-time job. The start of the year, I started working with Possum Creek Games. The art director is a really good and dear friend of mine. And she was like, are you going to be able to do this? Because I know you have work, but I would really like to work with you because I really like your work. And I really wanted to make it work. So for a while, it was just like very intense. I do not recommend it necessarily unless you really need it. I really needed it because, as I mentioned earlier, we were paying rents both in New York City and Mexico City. So I really needed that to happen. But again, I don't recommend you do it unless you really need to do it. But yeah, I don't know. One of the, I guess, techniques, if you can call it that I've been using, or I guess that lately I've been thinking about when I've been thinking about or wondering just how I've been able to like balance it, is like just do the work you feel like doing at the moment, even if you have like a huge pile of work you need to do, and like sometimes you get overwhelmed, you don't know where to start. I'm like, okay, what do I want to do right now, even if it's not like quote unquote the most pressing or like the most urgent thing at the moment. Just do what I most want to do, because once you get sort of into the pace of doing the work, it'll start flowing kind of naturally. Sometimes you get really tired. And I do have like, again, I had the privilege of working in a place where the people I worked with were very understanding, especially like, since we've been working in a pandemic, they've been very understanding of people's like adjustment periods and like burnout and stuff. And yeah, I've been very clear about my boundaries and my needs and what I need to be like, hey, this is kind of rough for me right now. I'm working with a lot of pressure right now. This is what I need in my like professional environment, because they've also like known me for like ever since I was in college. So they've known also that I kind of go back and forth between Mexico City and New York City, and that that I have needed some accommodations. It's just, I think when it comes down to it, just like be very clear about what you need first with yourself, and then you just draw your boundaries with people, your like professional boundaries with people, and be very clear about what you need professionally.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. How often are you taking on new client projects, and how do you go about finding them?
I think a lot of the time it has found me. Like, once again, Grub, who is the art director for Possum Creek again, is a good friend of mine. And then for this current comic project that I am working on, I have another friend, Gloria, who hooked me up with Caden Phoenix, which is like the editor and like writer and creator of these comics. Yeah, I think when it comes down to it, you want to be really good at, and I don't really like this word networking because I think it's kind of cold. I think it kind of takes from a little bit from like humanity, or like the connection, the human connections that you actually make with people. It's not that I've been networking to get jobs, I just like, I like the work of my peers. I am interested in the work of my peers, and I make friendships and I like them, and I like these people and I care about these people. And I think when you care about people and when you care about your environment, you end up making really good connections, really good friendships. And when I say connections, I don't necessarily even mean job connections, even though it's like a byproduct of it. I mean human connections that ends up taking you to some very interesting places. Again, my first job in video games I got because a friend made a posting on Twitter. So I think mostly just interact with your peers, and you don't know what people have in store for you, I guess, or like what places they could take you if you keep like an open mind.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What is your process for creating a new piece?
Uh, it depends. It depends whether it's client work or it's personal work, whether it's like, a comic, whether it's an illustration, whether it's lately I've been really enjoying making little paintings with gouache. I did a lot of traditional art in high school. It was mostly like a traditional art, visual arts academy. And I've been working so much in with digital media that sometimes I feel like I need a little break. So I've been experimenting a lot with like clay or paintings, or I've even started working a little bit with textile, which has been a lot of fun. But it really depends on what I am working right now. For example, with character design that I've been doing for Possum Creek, it's really, I'm not gonna say simple, but the process is a little bit more straightforward because they basically have like, okay, what does this character need? What they have a list of things that they want the character to achieve, or have. Like, here is a frog, and this frog is an innkeeper, and this frog is a little moody. So you kind of just like try to fit the brief, but also like try to experiment a little bit so you can give them like lots of options. Well, right now I am doing inks for a comic project, which is also kind of like very straightforward because the penciler already did, in a way, the hardest part, which is like come up with the characters and the poses and the layout. So I just like go over it with ink. When it comes to my personal projects, then it's when it gets a little bit more, when it gets a little harder, maybe. I don't know, man. Sometimes I just let the muse flow. I don't know what to tell you. Sometimes it stays without doing a single piece, and there's sometimes where I want to make things all the time. Yeah, I try to I think about the things I like, I guess. I like mermaids. I draw a lot of mermaids. I'm kind of bad, I have to say, at like personal art. Like, I mean personal, not like as in my personal work. I mean personal as in like a more inward, reflective, emotional sort of work, because I'm so used to working with clients, and I've been doing this since I was 17. So I feel like I'm still in very much in the process of finding myself as my own voice as an artist who wants to say things. But something that's really helped with that, I guess, is working on my graphic novel with my wife. It was a very different project when it started. She was the one who like first came up with it, who first created it. It came from a dream she had when she was a kid. And then we met and we started talking about it. And it was quite different when we first started discussing making it a reality together. And I think at this point I have like really contributed a lot to where the story is right now. I think I feel more comfortable as a storyteller than I feel as like, I don't know, an artist in the sense of the media that I use. Because I think an artist, they are very talented in the way that they are obviously able to capture their emotions with a single image in a way, or an emotion or a message. But I do think that, and that's why I've always been drawn to stories and to storytelling and like film animation, animated films and comics, is because I do think that I need to be able to tell a complete story with dialogue and, you know, over the course of like a big project, you know, I can't just say something with a simple image. I don't think. I like drawing like little cute, I don't know, characters for myself. Like I really love drawing clothes on characters. I love designing clothes on characters. So a lot of the time what I will just do is like draw an OC with a piece of clothing that I wish I owned or whatever. But when it comes to the work that really is important to me, I think I really want to be making comics and like animation. Well, animation is a little bit more of a complicated dream because it needs, it's I think a bigger pipeline. Like you need more people or you need a lot more time and more money. But comics is something that I've been able to do on my own.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's really interesting to hear because, I mean, obviously, it's, for any kind of creative endeavor, it's really hard to put a finger on, like, this is my process.
Yeah.
But it's still cool to hear about what are the different types of things that you like to consider depending on the medium that you're using.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I found that lately that when I've been working on traditional media again, that it's really freeing because I feel like at some point I just like when I've made this my job, it's like it has to have a or like reach a certain level of professionalism or like quality, I guess is the word. But when it comes to my traditional stuff that I just make for myself and for my own enjoyment, it's just really nice to not be concerned about that at all. It's just something that I'm making because I like creating stuff with my hands.
Definitely. I know that there are a lot of artists out there that kind of struggle with feeling like their piece is never done and that there's always like more tweaking that needs to happen. So how do you, I guess, know when to stop?
I think I struggle obviously with a lot of things with my art. I think that most artists are perfectionists by nature, and a lot of us always struggle with wanting to be better. But like in that particular sense of working with a particular piece and being like, does this need more? I don't know. I've never really struggled with that. I'm kind of a very straightforward person, and I'm just like, okay, is this enough? Or like, I don't know, does this look good to me? Okay, good, great, perfect. Does this look bad? No. Okay, do I want to spend more time on this? Yes. Okay, then let's try to make it look good. But if I don't, like, if I decide I don't want to spend more time and energy doing something that's not feeling fulfilling at the moment, I'm just like, okay, so it's okay. We can move forward to the next thing. I don't really feel like I've really ever struggled with that particular, you know, struggle of the arts.
Hey, fair enough. I'm sure there's a lot of other types of struggles out there. So,
oh, yeah.
Well, honestly, that does lead me to a question that I like to ask in every interview, which is to acknowledge that as much as we may love what we're doing and love working in the industries that we are, there are challenges. So what would you say that over the last several years of working within the art and animation, like what's been the most challenging part?
I think it's always comparing yourself to others and to your peers. I don't know, when I started working at Hyperbeard, it was like okay, so like I started working as an illustrator when I was 17. So in a way I was kind of ahead of some of my peers. And I do think that instilled some kind of like sense of confidence that kind of came plummeting down when I had this whole deal with my abusive boss. I feel like I kind of, as a dumb teenager, I thought that I was like superior to other artists my age, or, that sort of thing. But then I started working at Hyperbeard and I realized I started working with so many artists that are absolutely incredible and they blew my mind. And I was like, instead of feeling this kind of competitiveness against them, like, okay, these are my enemies, or my competition. I don't know. I started seeing them as, wow, these people are so cool and they have so much, I have so much to learn from them. And I've been so stupid as a teen who knows nothing about the world. And I am really, really lucky to be able to work with so many talented artists. And it kind of just like opened my mind to, what you can learn from everyone's work, even the kind of work that you would never aspire to do yourself, because I think everyone has a little bit to teach you. But yeah, I think comparison is something that I struggled with a lot, and feeling like my art isn't good enough. I feel like that's something that everyone struggles with a lot. But like an antidote to that has kind of been thinking how literally no one is able to do what you do. Like, even if you are not like the most like technically gifted or skilled artist, there could be like, maybe you are very good at comedic timing in your comics, or maybe your characters are super charming, or maybe you wish you were funnier in your characters, or your illustrations were more appealing or and funnier and stuff. But you are incredibly good at portraying lighting and texture or color. So that's like someone like every single one of us has something extremely unique to add to the table. And I just think that's the beauty of it, instead of thinking about it as competition. It's just like the wild variety of stuff that each one of us has to offer. And I think that's beautiful.
It is. It is really beautiful. I think that's wonderful advice.
No, I just think like it's something that at some points in my life it really like made me really depressed. I really compared myself to others. I remember I had like kind of like a self-inflicted or like one-way rivalry with one of my classmates in college, because I just thought she was like so talented, of course, but also she was like super fast and super efficient. And sometimes I would just like run of stamina very quickly, and I would just like see her go and go and go, and I was like, okay, I will never make it in the industry because she has this specific talent that I cannot achieve. Now that we are both like professionals and working out in, I guess, the industry, I'm like, we do completely different things. She's an animator, like an actual animator, character animator, and I'm a concept artist, and they require completely different skills. So that's always like really cool to see how everything each of us has to offer like is really important in its own like way.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Let's kind of flip this around. When you, again, look over the last couple of years, what would you say has been the most rewarding part of this journey?
I think we've talked a little bit about this. Definitely when I worked for Cartoon Network, because it has been kind of a childhood dream for me to work with those characters. I grew up with like the Powerpuff Girls and Adventure Time, but like that's something very external that doesn't really have that much to do with me as to like being in the right place at the right time. I think really what I can say that has really, I don't know, changed who I am as an artist is like all the confidence I've been able to gain just by, letting go of my prejudice, of thinking that I had to be better or worse than other artists, rather than just rejoicing in the diversity of it all. Just like being able to let go of that, I think, is the most successful thing I've done as an artist so far.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, as we start to kind of wind down, I'm curious, are there any upcoming projects that you are allowed to talk about that you are excited about?
Well, yeah. I think it's been announced. Yeah, it has definitely been announced because I've been talking about it a little bit on social media. So there's a upcoming comic called Mexica by this editing house, by this creator called Kid and Phoenix, that I've been working on. It's been really exciting, like finally being able to work on comics professionally. And most of it, I'm really excited to be working on Yazeba's Bed and Breakfast by Possum Creek. It's been really fun, like coming up with all of these characters and working with these writers. The Possum Creek team is like really so talented and fun, and it's been great to work with them. I'm really excited. I know that these guys do like absolutely incredible work, and I'm just like really really excited to see where they go as a company, because like again, I think they're not just like extremely creative and good. I think they're amazing people as well, and I'm really excited to see where they go in the future. But also I'm really excited to see like where this takes me, after working with them. Like I'm excited to meet all the people I'm gonna meet, and to interact with the people that hopefully will enjoy the game and stuff. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, I've been seeing a lot about that game, and actually interviewing a couple people like helping to write that game too. So it's
Amazing.
been fun. Yeah.
Can't wait to hear the interviews. I'm sure there'll be a lot of good talk there.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Aster, this has been such a fun conversation. If people want to find you and find some of your work, where should they go?
Definitely my Twitter and my Instagram. They are both at Asterisms with double A at the start. You can also find me. My website is asterisms.com, again with double A at the start.
Perfect. And I will definitely have links to all of those in the show notes. But thank you so much for coming on today. I have really enjoyed getting to know more about you and your just amazing journey.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed having this talk with you.
You just finished another episode of Roll, Play, Grow. To check out the show notes from today's episode, you can go to lightheartadventures.com/RPG. To keep up with every episode, please subscribe on your podcast player of choice. And if you're enjoying the show, I would absolutely love if you would leave me a review and share this episode with your friends. Your review might even get featured on an upcoming episode. To follow me on Twitter, you can either find me at lightheartadv for our business account, or at KetraWCR for tweets on gaming, my dog Bowser, and other random shenanigans. You can also find us as Lightheart Adventures on both Instagram and Patreon. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time on Roll, Play, Grow.